Hey Emma,
Yes, Malin.
what do you say when you're playing a video game and the soundtrack just isn't doing it for you?
I don't know. What do you say?
Tune ick. Hello and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your optimistic sky pirate host, Madelyn.
I'm your little fox host, Emma.
And thanks for tuning in to this week's show. This week, main quest edition, we are talking about Skies of Arcadia and Tunic. Tunic.
Tunic. That one got me a little bit. The element of surprise was there.
Good. That's good. That's a solid D+ joke. It's a solid, 6 out of 10. So perfect. I thought about doing something more like a riff on, tuna being gross. Tunic. But I think I went in the right direction.
Yeah.
So two very kind of exploration, bright exploration games, kind of.
Sort of. Tunic's sort of.
The colors are bright, is what I mean to say.
Yeah, that's sure. Yeah.
I agree, but the colors are bright.
Yeah, you're right.
But we'll start with the one that really is a bright exploratory romp. Skies of Arcadia, which is the 2000 Japanese role-playing game developed by Overworks, which is an internal Sega studio, and published by Sega, surprisingly, for the Dreamcast, and eventually in 2003 for the GameCube. Really just before the Dreamcast was cast aside.
Yeah. Even though it was, when it was initially put into pre-production, they were thinking it would be on the Saturn. And then apparently they were thinking, oh, this could be a launch title for the Dreamcast. And it was neither of those things.
It was a closing title.
Yeah.
They're apparently, I'm not that familiar with the Dreamcast Irv, given that, I was very young when it was discontinued.
Yeah.
But there were apparently not too many RPGs. So Skies of Arcadia was sort of notable for being an RPG on the system.
I think Sega in general, their consoles just didn't have a lot of RPGs on them.
It's just so funny to think about now. Now I almost don't even bother writing down for the new games what system it was released on, because it's all of them.
Yeah.
Maybe not Switch yet, but all of them, usually. And it's interesting to think about, 20 years ago, not just things didn't come out for every system, of course, but systems having distinct identities. There's no RPGs on imagine it being oh yeah, Xbox just doesn't have RPGs in the year 2023.
And that is especially Japanese origin role-playing games is a criticism that Xbox gets, because Xbox does not have very much of a hold in Japan, actually. But yeah.
Sure, but I still don't think you would come out and be there really aren't any on the Xbox. It'd just be yeah, of course, Square is developing for PlayStation first and foremost. But anyway, it was just a little haha, early 2000s.
Yeah.
But Skies of Arcadia makes not the Wikipedia greatest games of all time list, but pretty much every best Dreamcast game list features Skies of Arcadia in a high ranking.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the more notable, sort of cult classic games that has not seen any sort of modern revival or port or anything.
So in Skies of Arcadia, you play as Vise. You're an air pirate, charming Robin Hood-esque air pirate teen, alongside your sister. I think different things refer to Aika.
Adopted sister.
Ah, that's why some people are your pal.
Yeah.
Cool. I was that's interesting. What's the distinction here? Got it. Alongside your pal adopted sister Aika, with the Blue Rogues, Pirates for Good. You're trying to stop the Valuan Empire basically from using ancient weapons to destroy the world. And so the two of you, along with like other buddies and Fina particularly, as someone who joins your party, but alongside other pirate buds, traveling all around, finding various colored crystals, as you have to in games. Like, you can't be doing anything in games of this era other than traveling around finding various colored crystals, right? It's got to be in it. And trying to beat the baddies.
Yeah. So yeah, for most of the game you play as Vice, but for most of the game, Aika and Fina are basically mandatory characters for your party, and then you'll have like a guest character sometimes. Or you can fill the last role with like one of three others, but you generally can't take out Aika and Fina unless there's like a story event.
Yeah.
So it is more of like there's a trio of main characters that you're following around.
Totally. Yeah, that is notable. Yeah, Aika and Fina are very much on level playing field, kind of co-protagonists with Vice, and they're ladies. So
yeah.
Go 2000, Skies of Arcadia.
Well, the producer was Rieko Kodama, who was a notable like female producer at the time. She just died last year, sadly. But I imagine that might have had some impact on the game and prioritizing that.
So Skies of Arcadia, of course, as a role-playing game of the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s era, turn-based battles, but also 3D airship flying.
Yeah. There are both the sort of standard character battles, where you have your party, and then there's also like airship battles as well, which are mostly the same apparently, except in airship battles you're like charging up a cannon that like once you fire it the battle's over. Essentially, was what I was reading about the combat.
Your character's strength like corresponds to the cannon's strength, which is like kind of funny. It's like, yeah, like you're doing push-ups and it's beefing up your cannons.
Yeah,
Which apparently it was originally going to be trains, which I think is so, like, what a weird early concept for this. Like, you were going to be traveling around on land instead of in the sky.
Yeah.
Which I imagine would be a very different vibe.
Yeah.
So, as we said, Skies of Arcadia is regarded as definitely one of the best Dreamcast titles, but it didn't sell well. This is also there's a lot of kind of like confusing, contradictory information out there on Skies of Arcadia, in that like some places are like, it was critical and commercial success, and other places are like, it sold like 50,000 copies. And I think the latter seems more likely, given that we've seen exactly none of this since then. But it didn't sell super well, probably because the Dreamcast, died.
Yeah.
And also because there was not necessarily an RPG, a JRPG audience on the Dreamcast.
I wonder if it was really successful ones. I wonder if Legends was more successful, the GameCube version.
I read that it was not.
Well, then who knows?
But it's certainly a game that has some like very vocal, like beloved fans.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was not necessarily played by too many people, but certainly made an impact on many of the people that did play it. Do we want like Madelyn's lore corner? I can do some Madelyn's lore corner.
Yeah, give us some of the lore, Madeline.
You got it. Okay. So, the game takes place, perhaps unsurprisingly, in the fictional skies of Arcadia, where there used to be 6 civilizations that coexisted on floating continents, each that had like a moon orbiting them of different colors. All right, and each of those civilizations kind of corresponds sort of roughly to like various real world civilizations. Like there's like an Aztec one, and there's like an Arabian one, and there's China and stuff like that. Which is apparently because someone on the team like majored in history and was like excited to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I read there's like a couple of things that were repeated as inspirations. Like one, he had majored in history, and I believe Kodama had majored in like archaeology as well. So they focused on that. They talked a lot about like the feeling, the mythos of like the Age of Discovery era, right? But of putting it in the skies versus the sails, and also Castle in the Sky.
Yeah. I know, I was about to say I feel like Click Like Boyfriend would enjoy this game, but then I was like, does Click Like Boyfriend really play turn-based? I can't like think of turn-based games that he really plays, other than like Pokemon.
I mean, that is a turn-based game, though.
I know, but it's hard to, like, it feels separate. I feel like Pokemon is not the same. I feel like enjoying Pokemon does not mean you will enjoy other JRPGs.
You gotta force him, like, on a persona and see how he responds scientifically.
Maybe I will encourage him to take that up after he moves. Like, he'll need some time-consuming games.
Right, yeah.
Once he plays all of Zelda, of course. Anyway, thousands of years before, back in the lore, right? Not thousands of years before Click Like Boyfriend, thousands of years before in Arcadia. The civilizations used to fight with each other with things called gigas, which are basically like huge weapon things. And then the Silver civilization basically caused the apocalypse with a superpowered giga that like caused the rains of destruction and just sort of like destroyed everything. And everyone was like, whoa, maybe war is bad. So the gigas were sealed away while everyone kind of tried to rebuild. And so now where we pick up, right, Empress Theodora of the Valuan Empire wants to reawaken the gigas and like take over the world and just conquest, right? So the blue rogues are like, no, that's bad. And the silver civilization is also like, no, that's kind of bad. So the blue rogues are fighting against them. Fina is also trying to find, basically the gigas are powered by things called moon crystals, right? So she's also trying to find those first. And eventually they're like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So they team up and you travel around finding various colored moon crystals. Spoiler, some bad stuff happens. But in the end, you reign victorious over the baddies.
Yeah, one thing that was noted also in a lot of development was they talked about at the time a lot of RPGs were sort of downers, I guess. Or at least very like serious in tone.
You can think of Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII as emblematic of this era.
Yeah, and so in contrast, they were really like thinking about they wanted like a more optimistic and cheerful sort of atmosphere to the whole thing.
Which really seems to be the thing that, you know, for the really vocal fans, is what made this game so impactful, is that kind of bright and cheerful tone.
Yeah.
It's hard for me in just reading about it to figure out how it would hit playing it now. It definitely seems a little corny, but it's hard to tell out of context when corny things are good corny and when they're bad corny.
I mean, it has a lot of elements that I'm like, yeah, I like that. I really like having a very small core group of characters.
Yep. 3
main characters sounds awesome. And I really like having a good vehicle in the game. So those 2 elements together, I'm already like, this seems like it'd be rad to me.
It's funny that Kingdom Hearts has one of those things.
You're right, it doesn't... I mean, it does have a vehicle.
Right? Yes. That was the thing I was saying it didn't have. Yes. Anyway, that's interesting to me too, though, of like, oh, okay, it's like in this era of like, very broody RPGs. But then, of course, like Kingdom Hearts comes out right around here. which is not broody in quite the same way as Final Fantasy VII is. So,
it's also an action RPG.
Yeah,
right?
no, it's
a little bit different.
Directly comparable, for sure.
Yeah. I also saw them talk, again, sort of in contrast to Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII, is in terms of like the graphical focus. They focused on making sort of the characters more expressive and being able to like emote in their game models, which I thought was really interesting because like the original Final Fantasy VII sure had sure had its growing pains in terms of visuals outside of its, you know, FMV stuff. And Final Fantasy VIII seems like, from what I've seen of it, prioritizes like tableaus more outside of its FMVs, right? Like they have really impressive, like you're running across battlefields stuff. But when you look at just their in-game models, they're like impressionist paintings, basically. And so in this, their real focus was like on making sure like their faces were readable and could make like convincing expressions, which I thought was interesting to think about. Like, oh, at that time, like you didn't have both, right? Not that Skies of Arcadia doesn't have nice tableaus, but not in the same way that Final Fantasy VIII does. But it's just interesting to think of like, okay, we'll prioritize this for graphics to match the thing in the game, versus now where people are like, you must have photorealism. Just to, like Final Fantasy VII Remake, for example. It's a good example.
Yeah. No, I mean, and it's interesting too, you know, as the kind of decision point behind the sort of anime style look of them isn't just, I mean, you could say like, oh, that totally fits sort of an optimistic, like swashbuckling pirates story, right? Like One Piece sure is out there, right?
Yep.
But also like as a really practical choice of the bigger their faces are, the more you can see what they're doing. And in this era, the more realistic their faces were, you know, they had to be smaller, they had to have smaller eyes, whatever. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily be able to read the kind of detailed facial expressions that they wanted the characters to be able to have, which is so interesting. Like, again, you would never have to make that choice now. If you want them to be anime looking, they can just be anime looking.
Man, One Piece was around back then.
Yeah, One Piece has been around since thousands of years ago.
Is older than me.
Yeah.
Okay.
He still hasn't found it. Whatever the thing is that they look for in One Piece, they're still looking.
They're still looking. Can't imagine. Sorry, I just had to look that up because you mentioned it. I was like, was One Piece really already there? And yes.
It sure was.
Sure was.
Which it surprises me. I don't know. I guess like the pop culture knowledge of anime has really come a long way in the past few years. But it surprised me that it doesn't come up more in kind of contemporaneous reviews of like, it's pirates, so and it's from Japan, so we have to compare it to One Piece.
Yeah, that's true. I'd be interested from like a historical context if you could make a case that like there was some inspiration there. I don't really know. Like, I mean, I assume One Piece has always been popular because Jump didn't cancel it,
right?
But I wonder how popular it was like 3 years into its run versus now. Anyway, that's beyond the point.
You know, if the rumors that it's being remastered are true, maybe we'll get to find out.
Yeah. The other notable thing that was like sort of an early example of this is it had very adaptive music based on what was happening in combat, especially. So like the moves you were doing, how well you were doing, the music would shift slightly to indicate the sort of tone of the battle at that point. Which is pretty regular now, but was not as regular back then.
Well, and people were pissed about the GameCube version where, because of how things had to be compressed, the audio apparently did not come through unscathed.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is interesting, though. I mean, given that there are rumors of this being remastered, I'm trying to think of not that like this is necessarily like, you know, AAA exactly distinction really existing in 2000, right? It's not like like indie games in 2000. What are those, right? Like they not nearly at all the same distinction. But it's hard for me to think of something made at all recently that has the core of like just pure optimism of this game in the same way.
Admit I'm not very familiar with Dragon Quest, but maybe Dragon Quest.
That's fair. Although with the, you know, the asterisk by it of like Dragon Quest obviously is a very long running series.
Yes.
So
I mean, so is most large
that's fair.
Games now. So
it's just interesting to think about. I mean, not that this game sold very well, so maybe it wasn't marketable even then. But to make something like, I mean, not that this game is uncomplicated, right? There's a lot going on. But to make something where it's so like, nah, like our heroes are like heroic and like good people and ready to see the best in things. I don't know. We're like, are we emerging from like anti-hero decade? Maybe. But slowly. Now I guess we're probably just in like sad hero.
Yeah.
Decade.
Yeah.
Sad dad.
We're in the sad decade, you're right. We are sure in a sad decade.
Do you think they're really remastering it?
Oh, who knows?
But the Xbox guy says they're remastering it, Emma.
It would be nice. You know? But I don't know. You know, there's always rumors about things people want, you know? And I just prefer to wait until it actually happens. Or not, you know?
Yeah. Hey, turn-based is in. Turn-based is in.
People want turn-based. Yeah.
People want to be able to check their people played Elden Ring with no pause menu. And they were like, I just want to check my text messages.
You're right. From Software should make a turn-based game.
You know? That's not what I'm saying.
Can you imagine?
People are like, you know, I would. There's no commercials anymore. Although I don't know, whatever. I guess like all of these streaming services are adding commercials back. It's the I need a break rebound. So go turn-based. Yeah, bring it back. I don't know. I always wonder what the like. How do you determine which of these like random beloved games that you canceled in the 90s to early 2000s to bring back for a random remaster?
My honest guess is like whoever is like played it as a child who has now found themselves in a position of power at a game company.
Love that.
Says, hey, what if we did this?
So you're saying it's just someone at Sega being like, hey, I liked this game.
Yeah. I really liked Super Monkey Ball. I think we should make a new one.
They should make a new one. They've been re-releasing the same Super Monkey Ball like for years. Make a new one.
I think we should release the same Super Monkey Ball again.
Which is exactly what they just did. Which was fine. I got it. I bought it. But come on.
You gotta get a position of power at Sega, man.
How do I do that?
Career change.
Apparently the way to do that is to flunk out of architecture school in the 80s. And just like
yeah,
join
get on
them.
that.
Work on the time machine.
All right, shall we talk about
Tunic?
Tunic.
Both these games have good soundtracks, by the way. So that opening joke has a tinge of irony.
Yeah.
Dramatic irony for you as the listener who knows that both of these games have good soundtracks. Yeah. So Tunic is a 2022 asymmetric, early Zelda-like sort of action adventure from Isometric Core Games, which is really just Andrew Should-Ice and a few other folks, published by Finji.
I think it's Should-Ice.
Should-Ice.
I don't think you pronounce the should in there.
So it's like shoulder as opposed to like should've.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I'm sorry, Andrew. Andrew Should-Ice.
Yeah, he started, it was a solo project at first, and then grew into like a small team.
And in Tunic, you play as a fox doing adventure-y things.
Yep, that's basically it. You wake up on the beach as a fox, and you run around being like, where am I? What's happening? And you find some stuff, and you figure out sort of what's happening.
So it's very much, as any review of this game will tell you, and as the developer is very upfront about the influences, very much a Talk This mashup. This is what he says. He says in his quotes, just like on Talk This, it's dangerous to podcast alone. Even though I started developing this game in 2015 and the podcast did not begin releasing episodes until 2017.
Right.
I mashed up 2 games. And that's, you know, the classic, like, original Legend of Zelda, kind of very early ones. And Bloodborne. Which should probably, like, that there will probably tell you whether you want to play the game. But let me tell you, I feel like I had seen enough, like, chatter about Tunic that was like, don't spoil any of it for yourself. Like, don't read anything about this game before you play it. Like, go into playing the game. That I, in fact, did not read anything about the game before I played it. And yeah, was a little bit taken by surprise by the difficulty of the game.
Yeah, I was a little surprised when you're, not because it's difficult, but I was a little surprised when you're saying, like, oh, I've been interested in this, because it's sort of, like, vague, like, discovery-based storytelling system is something I thought you didn't really appreciate most of the time.
Well, I was interested in it because I knew it was a Zelda-like. Like, an older Zelda-like. And I was like,
right.
I like that. I enjoyed Link's Awakening. I liked Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons on the Game Boy Color or whatever. You know, quick boyfriend likes Zelda games. I had not really internalized when it came out that it was also a vague Souls-like thing.
Yeah.
That part of it is working okay for me, to be honest. The game feels like small enough. It's not to say it's small. I just mean it's like, oh, I can't get totally lost, basically.
Yeah.
Or I can't, like, just go, like, running off in the fields. I guess, like, there are ways to sequence break or to look for more secrets or that kind of thing, and I have done a little bit of that by mistake.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like Breath of the Wild for me, where it's just like, oh, there's so many things I could be doing at any given time. Like, this game does feel like it has an order that you should do things in, which helps.
Yeah, they did talk about it in a few interviews, and the audio designer is actually a speedrunner as well. But they talked about that they have some stuff, like, built in there, and stuff that, like, they knew was there but left it in because they thought somebody would appreciate it. And obviously, like, if you're playing it again after having played it, like, it's not like things are locked, like, by the game. They're locked by your lack of knowledge. So if you were going to play it again, you would be able to utilize that knowledge from the start, and approach it in a different way.
Yeah, I am really impressed by the ways that they use the isometric perspective to hide things, right? There's so many secret pathways where you can already see, like, oh, if I was a speedrunner, I could skip this entire thing because I know that I can walk along this secret path to the left of this wall that you can't see at all and you'd never look for it. So, like, that I thought was really clever. I was like, this is very smart. and intentional, right? There's so many kind of isometric-y games where it's just like, like that's kind of trendy right now. And so like you're going to do it from that perspective. And I was really impressed by how this felt like really core to the experience and core to what it was doing and really well integrated. Something that can often just sort of feel like, yeah, it's like, that's the choice.
Yeah. Yeah, in a couple of the interviews he was talking about how like they thought about like you have the special sort of combat camera that you use when you focus on an enemy. So you use like LB or whatever L1 or whatever.
Yeah, it's L1 on the PlayStation.
And that like shifts your view a little bit as well, but you can use that outside of combat. So for example, if you wanted to look at something from a slightly different angle, and perhaps find something obscured by some geometry, you could shift your camera around a little bit if you were exploring. I think that just like shows that they were actually thinking about it, and how a player would interact with things. I also found it really interesting. He talked as we did an interview with Andrew Schultes. I told you how to say it, and then I stumbled over it. Who has a radio voice, I should say. I'm listening to NPR right now.
Yeah.
He just has that very distinctive, like, this guy's an NPR guy, even though he's not. But they talked about how they put secrets in the game and talked about them from, like, percentages. Like, oh, this is a 100% secret. Like, it's secret, but theoretically we want, like, every player to be able to find this relatively simply, right? Versus, like, a 10% secret that's, like, something that only someone who is really poking at stuff would find. I think that's a really interesting way to think about a game that's all about discovery of, like, okay, so we have these, like, more critical things that we want players to be able to find, so we have to design them so that they're hidden but also findable, and then we can have stuff that's just for the freaks.
Yeah. Well, that's something that's sort of, I don't know, really core to what sounds to be the whole design philosophy of this game, which is, again, in these this guy gave a lot of, like, really interesting interviews. Some are like, in this interview, I've got, like, all these, like, haha, these are fun quotes in my notes. But this idea that, like, sort of at all times in this game, they want you to feel like, oh, you've, like, you're a little in over your head, like, you're somewhere you shouldn't be kind of energy. And it does feel that way. Like, sort of the whole time I'm playing, I'm like, uh-oh, did I miss an easier area?
Yeah.
And, like, nowhere, you know, built into this, like, what we haven't talked about yet, but, like, one of the core gimmicks of the game is that as you go, you're, like, finding pages to the game's, like, game manual, right? So, like would have come with it if it was The Legend of Zelda and you were buying it for, like, an early Nintendo system, right? But it's, like, mostly not in a readable language, right?
Yeah.
So you get, like, a lot of information from kind of pictures and stuff, but you better hope that you're not dumb, like me, and miss important things that make the game harder for you because you didn't pay close enough attention.
Yeah.
So it does feel very satisfying when you figure those things out, but also you can miss really basic things and feel very stupid.
Yeah.
For instance, let me just give an example here. As you play the game, like, you pick up a variety of items, right? Like bombs and things that you can use in combat, but you also pick up items that you can use to upgrade your stats. Now, note that I use the word use there. I thought that just by picking up those items that you got the stat upgrade. So I got all the way through. There's a boss that you fight sort of at the end of, like, what feels like kind of the opening segment of the game, where the manual will tell you, try to be at these levels to fight this guy. And I was like, oh, I think I'm at those levels because I have these items in my inventory. So I beat this whole first boss at base stats, not realizing that I was supposed to, like, turn in those items to get boosts.
if it makes you feel better, that is like the most cited lack of understanding example
And like
that I've seen
in
the reviews.
I told this to Clickbait Boyfriend on the phone yesterday, and he was like, are we stupid? Like, he was watching me play most of this. He's like, are we stupid, or is it just like not clear? And so on one hand, I feel better that everyone is messing that up. On the other hand, when I went back and looked at the relevant game manual page, it was like very obvious. It was like right there. Like you could see him making the offering and like exactly the buttons that you have to press. It's right there. So I am just dumb.
Some of the pages of the manual will also have like little handwritten parts or drawings on it too, which I think is a really, one, just a cute touch, and two, like a spooky touch.
Yeah.
I really like the vibe. I really like the vibe of like being somewhere and going in somewhere and finding like a chest that's already open.
Yeah.
That's just like a really good like, oh, I see. These chests were not just placed in this world for me to pick up. They're actually here. And sort of creates like, and for Tunic especially, where you're like, are you really supposed to be doing this with your little stick? Until you get a sword eventually, but you know, your little stick, it creates this feeling of like, oh, you're not really, you know, picking things up, especially since you're pointed the way to the hero's grave, which like, oh, well, I guess I'm not the hero.
Yeah.
Hero's frickin' dead.
Yeah, there are fewer of those already open to chests as you go, which I guess makes sense given that the hero's grave seems pretty early on.
Right.
So Tunic has a very, like, almost cozy game aesthetic to it.
Yeah.
But I feel like we're going to start seeing more and more of this as, like, cozy games have sort of become a thing, and people love subverting expectations. I'm worried about the number of people who probably bought this game for their, like, 7-year-old, you know?
Yeah. I don't know, maybe the 7-year-old would figure it out better. They don't have to read anything, really.
I mean, 7-year-olds can read, though.
Well, yeah, but do they like to?
I'm just saying, like, a 7-year-old could read enough to play, like, Zelda, so I feel like that's not the barrier. The barrier here is that the combat is challenging.
Yeah, so I played a little bit with the power of Game Pass.
Best skill in gaming.
Like, just really bounced hard off the combat. It's just really slow for me.
Which is so interesting, because he's like, it's gotta be Souls combat, but faster.
Yeah, but like Souls combat is so slow.
Yeah.
I really like, you know, I'm used to my Kingdom Hearts where it's just so fast.
Kingdom Hearts ruined me for this too, because I could only, in Kingdom Hearts it's just like dodge roll my entire time. Dodge roll, dodge roll, dodge roll. And here it's like, you get 3 rolls.
I really just wanted a block, and you get one eventually, but like, it's slow enough that I'm just like, why would I roll? I cannot roll in time to get away from a hit at all.
Guess what, though? The shield also uses your stamina.
Sure, but I can just put it up.
That's true.
You know? I don't have to worry about, like, rolling and hitting the iframes or whatever. There are some accessibility options. So you can turn on sort of no damage mode. If you don't want to engage with the combat, or it's sort of, you can turn off the stamina essentially, so that you have infinite stamina, which, you know, I have Game Pass right now. Maybe I'll go back, and until I get a shield I will turn one of those on and then give it a shot, but I don't know.
I know for me, I've found, at least so far, so I won't, like, spoil the game too much, but like I said, I made it past what felt like sort of a culminating early game boss that led me back to somewhere near the beginning. which is hopefully enough context for anyone that has played the game, but doesn't really ruin anything. And I personally found the boss fight, like, I didn't mind that I was doing it over and over, because I sort of felt, in that, like, Souls-y way, not that I've played any of those games, that I was, like, learning it, and I was like, okay, like, I keep messing up, but, like, I understand the difficulty here, and I feel like I'm getting better at it. Sometimes the fights with just, like, the normal enemies are like, this sucks. Like, there's some, like, alligator creatures where it's like... You're like fighting like 3 of them at a time, then please, come on. And granted, maybe if I had been leveling up my stats as I went, it wouldn't have been
that might have helped you
quite as brutal. But I sort of just felt like I was getting just absolutely murdered by these mobs of alligators. And I was like, this isn't fair. Like, there's no strategy. In the boss, I felt like there was a strategy, and I could, like, get better at the strategy over time. But those just sort of felt like, okay, I just have to keep running around and running around and running around and hope that I survive.
Yeah.
But if you've played, Elden Ring or these Souls games, maybe you will be better at it. Maybe this would not be. I think I'm going to continue pushing through. I'm enjoying it. Once I figured out what it was, I was a little nervous it wasn't going to be for me. But I got that far without having to look anything up online, which I was proud of.
There you go.
I did end up having to look up, because after I got to that sort of like here's the next things you need to do thing, I couldn't find where I was supposed to go. Which is funny, because I was literally standing right next to it. It was just the isometric. I didn't understand there was a path to my right, basically. I felt so dumb.
I had to look up because I couldn't see a ladder in the shadows.
Nice.
Yeah.
I did accidentally run into what I think is the sort of final area that I'm supposed to go to, and got brutally murdered several times before I looked it up and was like, maybe I'm not supposed to go here. That was also, I think, before I realized that I could upgrade my stats, so maybe it would be better.
Yeah.
But I did find that area by mistake, just running around trying to figure out where I should go. So that's something. A couple of other choice quotes from these interviews that I do want to share. I did like the developer's acknowledgement that Zelda meets Dark Souls is the tritest, most white guy making an indie game sort of thing. She said the Polygon article. Yeah. I was like, at least you're self-aware. And then I also like that he... so this game obviously is very much about sort of that exploration and feeling a little bit out of water and figuring out puzzles. So I also thought he talked about in an interview with Rock Paper Shotgun that he didn't let himself play Outer Wilds, because he said, I knew if I played it, I would just curl up into a little ball and disappear forever.
Yeah, it is if you liked Outer Wilds, you might like this.
No, I'm glad I'm playing this. Clearly Boyfriend is away for a few days, and I feel like it's good, because he saw me play a chunk of this game, but I think if I can power through and beat a lot of it without him here, it's he can go back and play this. Mm-hmm. Because he, of course, is a big Outer Wilds fan. I have to go back to Outer Wilds. I don't know. To go back to it for real. The Notebook.
I don't remember which interview this was, but I also liked he talked about the challenge of making a trailer for it. One of the interviewers was talking about you to show off these types of weapons in the trailer, and he was like, yeah, I hate it. It sucks to have to show things in the trailer. I wish I could just say, hey, this game's cool, I think, and people would buy it. So that, because the whole thing is, discovery, right? Yeah. So when your whole game is built around discovery, even showing things you get a sword, or, a whip thing, or whatever, is hard to be here you go in the trailer. But, that it doesn't sell games to just be it's cool, I promise. And so you have to find a balance between, keeping some things away from marketing, but giving enough away so that your game looks good.
Well, this game I think is especially challenging because the aesthetic, well, it sort of conjures that kind of early Zelda.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's wearing green.
I mean, yes, he's wearing green. Well,
Not that
but, like,
Link wears green anymore.
That, like, brightness, right? Like, that's something that got talked about for this game, too, of that brightness being something that you don't necessarily see in games kind of like this so much. I mean, think about Outer Wilds is not bright like this game. But if you market it that way, it's like, oh, cute fox with a sword. Then it is like, yes, I'm going to buy it for my 7-year-old. And look, I mean, I think some of the experience of this game is capturing the feeling of being a 7-year-old playing a game that is a little bit too hard for you.
Yeah.
I think it's calibrated, though, for that feeling as an adult. And I think if you put a 7-year-old into a game that is calibrated to make an adult feel like a 7-year-old a little out of their depth, the 7-year-old is not going to have a good time.
It is sort of an interesting evolution of, like, the cutesy horror game fad. Of, like, even now there's a lot of horror games that have a very, like, pleasant aesthetic or cutesy aesthetic that is then contrasted with horror images. But if you're not looking at that carefully, you might not be aware. But this is, like, the intellectual version of that, I guess.
Yeah.
Of, like, oh, it looks quite cozy, looks like it would be comfy to play, and then you get mauled by big white slimes again for the 4th time on your way to get a sword. I mean, what?
That didn't happen to you.
That didn't happen to me.
I didn't even really, like, I sort of thought that maybe the sword was already going to be gone, and so I was using the guys with swords to, like, cut down trees for me.
That's clever, Mom. That's
it is clever, except that there is a sword. I was like, oh, what a clever little game. Like, I have to use the guys to cut down the trees. I can't just kill them right away.
That's a challenge speedrun for you.
Apparently, yeah, no sword. No sword any percent. But, I will say that, like, this game does check some of the, like, Madelyn cozy boxes, in that it's like, yes, I can say to myself, I'm going to give myself 3 tries at this boss, and then I will answer some emails on this fine Saturday, Today is Sunday, of course, but in the past. So, for me, like, the ability to, like, be like, I can do it discreetly. But then also, there's the danger of, like, oops, I've tried 10 times.
Well, any last thoughts on Tunic, or should we move to the mashup?
It's on sale on PlayStation right now.
It's on Game Pass.
It's also on Game Pass, if you have an Xbox. If you hate RPGs and you have an Xbox. Just kidding. Let's mash. Okay, it's gotta be bright.
Fox Sky Pirate. There. Done.
I've done it. Star Fox? Is Star Fox a pirate?
That's in space, though.
Okay,
it's
you're
not
right.
really Sky Pirate aesthetic.
You're right. No, I don't
know what Star Fox is, actually.
He flies of something. But you're right, I have no idea.
What is his job?
I think he might be more of an Air Force sort of thing. I don't know. I can't remember. I don't think it can be
Anyway, that doesn't have to be our mashup, but I do think Fox Sky Pirate has a lot of potential, and someone should take that and run with it.
I agree. I might change the animal, just so people aren't like, it's Tunic in the sky.
Sure.
I could make it like a fennec fox.
I think they should be like a longer fox anyway.
Yeah. Hedgehog. I feel like a hedgehog in the sky could be good. Lemur.
Lemur Sky Pirate? I don't know about that.
Why not?
I don't know about the Lemur Sky Pirate. I don't know.
Okay. Zaboomafoo literally rolling in his grave. Okay. It's gotta have, like, I mean, I know Tunic isn't, like, optimistic, but, like, the look of it is optimistic. It's gotta have, like, a sense of exploration and wonder.
Yeah.
To it, for sure. It's tough to balance. Like, how would you capture the feeling of Souls combat in a turn-based setting? Could you?
I don't know. I feel like it's harder to balance turn-based combat. Like I was saying, like maybe you just have it so like you're somehow always on the verge of death in any battle.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's hard to actually like manage without just
But it just becomes like
dying.
a trial and error. There's like a correct order of doing things.
Yeah.
That, yeah, is tough. But I don't know. On the other hand, like, man, I do feel like in Tunic, as soon as I make one mistake, I'm dead sometimes. It's like, oh, I missed one dodge. That's it. I got hit 3 times.
Maybe for a turn-based one, I think maybe you'd need to remove some of the randomness of it.
Mm.
Like, there would be some, like, telegraphing of what it's going to do next anytime.
Yeah.
Versus, like, you can just attack anybody. With whatever you're fighting, just attack whoever based on,
right,
like, rolling a dice or however it works.
Right, and so you have to learn that telegraphing, but then...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't necessarily do everything in the same order every time, but just being able to recognize what it was going to do next.
Yeah. I'm interested.
That could maybe work.
Takes away from me being able to check my text messages, but that's okay.
Well, it'd still be turn-based.
I know, I'm just kidding.
Although, maybe we'd do real-time turn-based. Split the difference.
Yeah. I feel like the Yakuza people could just be sky pirates and that would be it. I could do that.
Yakuza's... That free idea again. That's already Sega.
I know.
That's the next spin-off they should do.
Skies of Arcadia, but it's...
I don't know if he would be super happy about that, but
whatever.
I do think they put Ishin. Next time they should make the Sky Pirate spin-off.
Yes, based on that storied period of Japanese history.
Well, I meant like there's also the zombie one.
You're right. I forgot the zombie one that I still have to play.
We got the history covered. We got the zombies covered. Next, we need Sky Pirates. Steampunk Yakuza. Very good idea.
Yeah.
TBH.
Dope. Who would get Barrett's arm? That'd be sick. Kajima, absolutely. No question. Anyway. This is not neither here nor there. I have to get back to the mashup.
That's sort of a mashup, in a way.
Yeah. Well. I mean, guess what? A game that's all about, like, sort of, like, vague exploration that involves the sky.
I don't know what that game is. I don't know what you're talking about.
Me either.
What do you mean, a game in the sky that involves exploring? That sounds fake to me.
That's why I'm, like, having to lean into the turn-based. Imagine if Tears of the Kingdom had Souls combat. Imagine if they had just, like, dropped that on people. No warning.
Yes, you can fuse explosive to your club. However, every boss is brutally difficult. The give and the take.
Yeah. I just feel like Sky Pirates in general are underutilized.
Absolutely. I mean, Final Fantasy XII brought in, like, the airships, so maybe they were cribbing,
Yeah, cribbing indeed. No, I just think you just put some animal Sky Pirates in the sky. It's pretty good.
You're right. No need to get complicated with this.
Yeah. Like, I'm trying to find, like, the perfect thing that's very complicated, but no, like, the obvious thing is actually pretty good.
Yeah, it is.
Well, listeners, have you played Tunic? Have you uncovered all of Tunic's mysteries? Have you played Skies of Arcadia? And are you of the crowd that's like, give me Skies of Arcadia. Please, 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 let Skies of Arcadia be released. Do you have a better mashup than our just like porcupine sky pirate in the sky doing some combat? Do you think that we should keep pitching this like cyberpunk in the sky Yakuza? Do you think that gummy ships do qualify as a good vehicle to fit Emma's requirements for an interesting game? If you have thoughts on any of these things or anything else we discussed this week, you should hit us up on social media. We are on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the game. Well, you can read all about the games from each episode on the blog, but what I meant to say is you can read all about the show, check out the games that are in the hat, and read our blog, featuring, Emma's lovely little, here's an episode, here's what we talked about, posts, as well as Clickbait Boyfriend and Split Screen. But finally, and perhaps most importantly, if you enjoyed the show, if you want Talk This in your life, you should subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, really anywhere you can find podcasts, wherever you found the podcast today, subscribe to Talk This. Next week it's 6 weeks in gaming. It snuck up on me.
Yeah.
Will I finish Trine 4 in time?
I'm waiting with bated breath to find out.
I know you can't wait. I know you're so thrilled that you put Trine as a thing, not thinking that I would play all of them in 6
I'm
weeks.
thrilled that you enjoyed them, honestly. I can't wait to hear the deep lore.
Oh,
Trine
get
4.
ready. We're going to talk about Amadeus's twins, the treatment of his wife throughout the series.
I'm ready. I'm ready for a deep...
the warrior appears without a helmet.
I'm ready for a deep philosophical breakdown.
I have a clear ranking of the... Actually, we were talking about Tunic, and I was, like, thinking about Trine. The, like, oh, I'm not supposed to be doing this energy. Ripped straight from Trine. Inspired by Trine.
There you go.
Anyway. Cookie Boyfriend's out of town for a few days, so, like, we're gonna have to mainline the last third of the game when he gets back to be done in time, but I'm gonna be done in time. But then, Emma, what are we gonna be talking about in 2 weeks?
In 2 weeks, our old game is going to be Sam and Max.
Nice. Buddies.
And our new game is going to be Forspoken.
All right. So look forward to that on Memorial Day weekend, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, listeners, that's our show. Thanks for tuning in. Emma, do you have a sign off?
This week, I hope that you can read the things that you need to read.